In today's video, we're going to talk about how to drive traffic to your book, your website, or your product listing. Although there are many ways to drive traffic, we're going to focus on 10 ways that you can become a podcast guest and how it can benefit you personally as well as your business. Before we get started, I'm not a marketing expert, so I'm only going to share with you what I know from experience and what I've researched. All right, let's get started so you can decide if being a podcast guest would be a good fit for you. What we're looking at here is an overview of a variety of ways to drive traffic. The main goal of showing you this slide is so that you can see that there are different ways to drive traffic. And the topic we're covering today is just the tip of a very big iceberg. Having said that, it's my intention to cover these topics and much more over time. And as you know, today we're focusing on how to become a podcast guest from a practical perspective, so you can get started right away if this looks like it would be a good fit for you. Just so we're all on the same page, here are some major podcasting platforms. And for those of you who are unfamiliar, you can access podcasts by searching online and from apps like the one featured here. This is Podcast Go, and we'll take a quick look at what that looks like. This is Podcast Go's main page. You can see different podcasts there, and you can search for popular podcasts from their menu and scroll through. You can also search by new podcast episodes. And you can even search by keywords. So I entered in fiction author here. This podcast is called Writership, and we're looking at the podcast description. And then now we're looking at an episode, and we'll check out the episode description just so you can see that it's pretty easy to search for podcasts. And that app is free. You can download it from Google Play, and it will allow you to find podcasts that are published on any popular platform. For those of you who may not be convinced that podcasting is worth your time, we'll be looking at some statistics published on this blog post on medium.com, and it's written by this author here. I'll link to this in the video description as well so you can read through it. We're going to focus on just a few sections. Casey is writing about how to become a podcast guest, and the portion of this article I want to show you has to do with the benefits of podcasts and its popularity. As you can see in this section of the article, being a podcast guest can lead to other opportunities beyond connecting with the audience of that podcast, including opportunities to be a guest on blog posts, public speaking engagements, YouTube appearances, creating your own podcast, and hosting webinars, just for example. And according to this article, podcasts have been growing in popularity and are expected to reach 160 million listeners in 2023 here in the United States. So for more information, check out this article. It's linked in the video description. But I really just want you to be able to see that podcasting, there's an audience for it. And we're going to take a look at how you can get started and some tips. But before we do that, let's dive further into some of the benefits. We're going to go beyond the benefits listed in this article, and I'm going to share with you some of the benefits that I've seen with podcasting. For those of you who don't know, I was previously a podcast host, and I've been a guest on various podcasts. So I wanted to share some of the benefits that came to my mind. On this slide, we're mainly looking at how being a podcast guest can drive traffic to your book, product, or business, and how it might benefit you personally when it comes to personal and professional growth. So the first one is public speaking. If you're just getting started, being a guest on a podcast could be a great way to ease into public speaking. It can help you feel more comfortable speaking publicly in an audio-only podcast if you don't feel like you're ready to be on video yet. And sharing your story can be a powerful way to impact others. Being on podcasts can sometimes offer the opportunity to share your story or share valuable information that could benefit the audience. It's also a great way to practice sharing or opening up if you feel some hesitations or reservations around that. And over time, through experience, you may find clarity around who is resonating most to what you're sharing. And this can help you further identify your core audience and cultivate a following. When it comes to driving traffic, podcasts can provide continual promotion of your product, story, and book, especially if your topic is evergreen, which basically means the topic you're discussing is helpful for others over a long period of time, as opposed to a trending topic. The longer your topic is relevant, the longer you're likely to receive traffic from it. Also, it's key that the podcast links back to your website, book, or product, either in the episode description or on their website. Also, it's key that the podcast links back to your website, book, or product, either in the episode description or on their website. Then for cross promotion, usually the podcast host will create shareable clips of the episode that they'll post on social media, and then they'll provide those shareable clips with you too, so you can share on your social media. This helps to amplify awareness of the podcast episode, which essentially helps people see who you are and what you're offering, and potentially drive traffic to your book, product, or website. Another great benefit to being a podcast guest is that it helps build a speaking resume, which creates credibility for future podcasts and speaking opportunities. And the more you're engaging with audiences, the more potential there is for promotional traffic. When it comes to SEO, many podcasts will have an associated blog that generates posts for each podcast episode. If they include links to your website, for example, that can drive traffic to your site. And then finally, if you were a guest on a podcast and it goes well, there's a possibility that you could be invited back for future topics and promotions, or you could pitch yourself to them again for another topic, and they may be more likely to welcome you back because of their positive experience with you. So over time, you essentially build a network of people that you may be able to work with on a reoccurring basis for different topics and launches and projects that you're working on, or things that you're sharing with the community. So the next question becomes how to become a podcast guest. We're going to answer this question from two viewpoints. The first one is from the perspective of searching for podcast guesting opportunities manually, or in other words, doing the groundwork yourself. So that might look like joining Facebook groups that are dedicated to podcasting, searching for podcasts on YouTube, social media, or on other podcasting platforms like Apple or Spotify, and reaching out to the podcast host to pitch yourself as a potential guest. And as you can see on this slide, there's 10 different ways that we'll be exploring. And we're going to start off here with the first group, and we're going to pull some examples from that first group. Looking at how you can do a simple search on Facebook to find podcasting groups. I've just entered in podcast into the search description here. And some of the groups here, you can see the group name and the size of the group, how active they are. You can join them, and some of them will let you post a little about yourself, your background, business, book, your preferred topics, and what type of podcast you're looking to be a guest on. Other groups feature podcasts that post guest requests and outline the type of person that the podcast is looking for. This option gives you the opportunity to decide if the podcast would be a good fit for you, and if so, to respond to their request. You may not know that reddit.com also provides groups that are specific to podcasting. So we're on the Reddit website. I entered in podcast and we're looking at the communities that come up under that search. And you can see how large the groups are, and it's really easy to search through, find one that looks like it might work for you and join it. And you can scroll down to see the different types of posts. You can also filter it. And then now you'll just see all the posts that are seeking guests. So that can be a real helpful tool as well. You can also find podcasts through blogs. For example, here is one published by Quill Podcasting. We're going to scroll down to see some of the resources that they've listed, and we'll select one for Podcast Magazine. And this website features podcasts. So you can see featured information about the podcast. So that's just another way where you can find opportunities, different podcasts, and reach out to them to see if they're interested in having you on as a guest. You can sort on this website by category. And we're going to look at the fiction category. And this is just as an example, just trying to kind of show you that podcasts are everywhere. You can find them and you can reach out to them and pitch yourself as a guest. Now we're going to look at this second group of options here, different ways to get connected to podcasting opportunities. There are multiple platforms listed here, and these aren't even all of the options. They're just the ones I personally used and know about. And I did some research to see if there were other platforms that came up. These were the core. Podmatch was a core one that came up quite a bit. Matchmaker.fm and Podcast Guests. Those came up repeatedly. So we're going to focus on these 5 options for connecting to podcast opportunities. And we won't look through each one. We're just going to list them here so you can explore them, and we'll dive deep into 2. We'll take a look at 2 different options. The first option we're looking at is podcastguest.com. It's free to get started. So you could go to the website and sign up as a guest. And we're going to be taking a look at that website from the mobile view. On this page here, we're at the podcast guest directory. If you're on the desktop, you would be accessing the directory from this tab here. So you can see the different categories that are there within the directory, and you can sort the results by category, or you can scroll down here and see featured guests. Okay, we're going to look at the fiction author category, and these are different guests, podcast guests, and examples of their listings, their information. And so podcasts can come here and find different podcast guests. And if you want an example of what one of your podcast guest page could look like, you could do a search like that and take a look at something that looks like it might be a match for you, just to get some inspiration about what your guest listing could be. At least once a week, the podcastguest.com sends out a newsletter. And in the newsletter, they feature different podcasts and guests. So that's really handy. If you go to the website and you create your listing, then you can get these notifications every week. And it's an easy way for you to see the different podcasts that are looking for guests. And as you can see, the experience that some of them are looking for can be, personal experience. You don't always have to be an expert in something. Sometimes these podcasts are looking for people to share their story. And that may be a way for you to be a part of an important conversation while also sharing with people that the fact that you have a book or you have a product or you have a business. When it comes to working with a booking agency, and although this is not the case in every situation, but you should know that hiring a booking agency may not produce the results that you want. They may have multiple clients and their processes can become quite automated. An example of this is they may have a template for posting guest requests, like in a Facebook group, for example. They may input your name, your title, your credential or list of topics, your availability, and then whichever podcast expresses interest gets to book an interview with you. This may sound harmless, but this approach could lead to being connected with podcasts almost randomly. Those podcasts may not be a good fit for you, which could lead to lower quality interviews and awkward experiences. And then not to mention, you'll have to pay service fees to the booking agent for booking you. Another problem with booking this way is that the agency may speak directly with the podcast host, which could prevent you from asking questions, getting a sense of the podcast host vibe, and having input on developing a topic in advance that's tailored to their audience. A strained connection with the host and a lack of preparation on the topic can lead to poor overall experience for the audience too. And since the main goal is to connect with the audience, this could cause frustration and ultimately further delay generating sales and building a following of your own. Now, this is not always the case. If you do choose to hire a booking agency, there are some benefits, like potentially eliminating the burden of searching for and pitching to podcasts and gaining access to the agency's contact network. And something else you could do is you might consider outlining some clear expectations and boundaries and verifying that they have the experience to book guests with your specific objectives, experience, and qualifications. In other words, if you're a fiction author, you might confirm that they have experience connecting fiction authors with podcasts and that the results for those authors have been generally successful. Interested in becoming a podcast guest and wondering if there's anything you need to know besides how to get on a podcast, then this section is for you. So I was previously a podcast host, and these are some of the key points for your consideration, things I thought would be helpful for you to know. The first one is be aware that you probably, if possible, will need to have a flexible timeline. You may think, I want to promote my book, and so I'm going to reach out to a podcast and hopefully, I'll be a guest in the next week. And it may not happen that quickly. Sometimes there's last minute openings. If you're looking through a Facebook group, for example, someone might say, hey, I have a last minute opening on my podcast. I'm looking for someone to fill in the next 3 days. Those kind of last minute opportunities do happen. Or you might put a post into a Facebook group and say, I'm looking to be a guest. Does anyone, have any openings or need someone? And somebody might pop up and say, actually, I've got an opening and I'm looking for someone. I'm interested. Let's see if, we can connect. So there can be some of those last minute opportunities, but for podcasts that really want to have want to provide a professional experience for their audience, they typically will plan ahead and they will have their podcast guests booked out, sometimes months in advance. So if you know that, then you may want to get ahead of this rather than waiting. So if you have a product launch or a book launch, don't wait until it's time to launch before you start getting yourself on podcasts. Start looking for opportunities and doing the legwork now, or using some of those matching platforms so that you can be prepared and be connecting with opportunities. And if you do you come across a podcast that looks like it will meet your needs, you can also schedule a time to be a guest in the future. So you could say, I'd love to be a guest on your podcast. Do you have an opening a month from now or 2 months from now? And so you could start booking yourself for time slots that are closer to your product launch or your book launch. So there could be, on top of that, there could be delays in your initial communication. You might reach out to someone and it might take them a week to get back to you. There can also be delays regarding scheduling an interview. Sometimes you schedule one and then something comes up, you have to cancel it and reschedule it. And then also there's the factor of you go on the podcast, you do your episode, but they may not actually publicly publish that episode until a week later, a month later, sometimes 6 months later, honestly. So part of your initial communication with them could be, when do you plan to publish this episode? When you're looking for podcasts to connect with, something to keep in mind is if you align on purpose, values, and the audience that they serve. So what kind of topics do they provide? And does that align with you, with your brand, your book, your product, your story? You also want to listen to their past episodes, get a sense of the communication style, the vibe, and the types of questions that they ask to make sure that there would be, it would be a good experience for you and you'd be able to put your best self forward as a guest on their podcast, and to ensure that the topic or the story or the information that you put out is likely to be a good fit for their audience. It's also important to listen to those past episodes because you're going to prepare a pitch. You're going to send a pitch to the podcast and let them know that you'd like to be on their podcast. And if you haven't listened to any of their episodes, you don't know what they're about, you don't know who they serve, then your pitch could be all off. You might be saying, hey, I'd like to talk about this topic, but that doesn't even pertain to, what they focus on and what would benefit their audience. You could be a mismatch. And so you're putting out effort, putting pitches out there, and they're going to read it or see it and potentially not respond to you, or it just may not move forward because they can see that you are not familiar with their podcast, you don't know their audience, and you may not be prepared to give a good experience to their audience because you haven't done your homework. So when you're putting your pitch together, you're going to be brief and effective. You'll say, why that podcast, why you feel it would be a good fit, a little bit about your background, what you're promoting, like you're promoting a book or a course or a product or your story, a few suggested topics that you think that their audience would benefit from. And if you have it, you can link to a media kit, which is some general information about you and usually includes links to your book or past interviews, to your social media, to your website, things like that. You don't have to have an actual kit. You could include that information in your email to them, your pitch to them. And then also something to consider, there's more than this, but these are just a few things. You can ask for their questions in advance. Some podcasts don't do that. They like it to just be kind of a conversation, but other podcasts do plan out the questions in advance and you can ask for them so that you can be prepared to answer them. And then you'll want to plan to test your equipment. They may do that with you and ask you to show up to the podcast recording a little bit early to make sure everything is right. And they may send you some of the basic equipment that you may need to have. Some podcasters will require you to use headphones, for example, to help eliminate background noise. And then others prefer that you have a mic, but that's pretty few and far between. And then there's the possibility that you'll need to sign a guest contract, which usually is about 1 page and just primarily gives them the ability to publish your episode and post clips of it on social media, on their website to promote the episode. And then if you can do it, if you can think of it, Speaking in sound bites when you're recording. So that means thinking about how you're talking. If you're able to be concise and communicate ideas in a few sentences, that can be really helpful for them. So then when they are pulling out clips from the episode, they can promote it. So you don't want to be too cagey when you're talking and overthink it. But if you can be aware that being concise and being really intentional in what you say and really honing in on an important message and sharing it succinctly, if possible, can be very powerful because it makes it that much easier for them to promote the episode and to share what you've had to say, which can lead to much more traffic. One final thought, you can also check out the podcast reviews and podcast social media to see what their fans are saying and what topics seem to resonate with them the most. There is so much more to marketing and driving traffic than what's included in this video, including the importance of key milestones and factoring that into your timing and preparation, and being ready to receive an influx of traffic, process orders, and provide customer service, and many other topics that go hand in hand with marketing, like speaking publicly, whether that's on a podcast or a YouTube video or on social media. With all that said, what are some of the challenges that you've experienced in driving traffic to your book, your product, or your website? Or what concerns you most about getting started when it comes to marketing? Feel free to share your thoughts, experiences, and topic suggestions in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching.